When the machines finally stilled, the world felt different lighter, as if the very earth had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. We stood there in the silence, not quite believing what our eyes were seeing. Snow glistened under the moonlight, covering the broken giants like a blanket, and for the first time in years, I heard the sound of laughter echo across the fields. Sarah turned to the people, her voice steady but full of wonder. Do you feel it? This is what freedom sounds like. The children clapped. Some even danced in the snow, their joy brighter than any lantern. But in my heart, I knew the fight wasn't only about shutting down machines. The real battle was about remembering who we are. And so I told them, this victory means nothing if we forget what carried us through. It wasn't strength. It wasn't weapons. It was love. It was memory. It was faith. Never trade those away, no matter what the future brings. The days that followed were filled with rebuilding. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years gathered together, patching roofs, sharing bread, teaching children old songs that had almost been forgotten. The porch light on my little house no longer burned for the lost. It burned as a symbol of what had been found. One evening, Sarah sat beside me, her eyes shining with both pride and exhaustion. Maggie, I don't think of myself as a leader, she admitted softly. I chuckled, patting her hand. That's how I know you are one, child. True leaders don't crave power, they carry responsibility. And you've carried it well. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and for a moment, I was back on that Kansas farm, my own mother's hand steady on mine. Life is a circle like that. What is given in love always finds its way forward. The children begged me to tell them stories every night, and I did tales of the old world, of hardship and joy, of mistakes and lessons. They listened wide-eyed, as if every word was a treasure. And I thought, maybe the greatest gift I can leave them isn't safety or shelter, but wisdom. Because wisdom, once planted, keeps growing. As winter gave way to spring, the fields around us began to bloom again. Green shoots pushed through the snow, birds returned to the skies, and I realized something profound: the earth itself was healing, just as we were. Spring came gentle that year, as if the earth itself wanted to cradle us after so much darkness. Flowers pushed through soil that had long been frozen, and the air carried the sweet scent of renewal. Each day, more people arrived, faces tired from the road, but eyes bright with hope. My little home, once a quiet refuge, had become the beating heart of something far larger, a community. Sarah helped organize work crews, sending groups to repair old wells and plant gardens. The young men and women who had once hidden in fear now walked with purpose, building shelters, teaching children, even daring to laugh again. It was as though life, stubborn and beautiful, refused to be silenced. One afternoon, I sat on my porch watching the children chase each other through the fields, their laughter rising like music. Sarah sat beside me, notebook in hand, sketching plans for a school. "We need a place where the young ones can learn," she said, "not just to read and write, but to remember where they came from." I smiled, my heart swelling. "Yes, child, teach them stories, too. Teach them that every scar carries wisdom, and every joy carries a lesson. Knowledge is power, but wisdom is what saves." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold, I felt tears sting my eyes. Not of sadness, but gratitude. At 75, I had thought my time was nearly done. Yet here I was, part of a new beginning. Maybe that's another lesson. Life isn't measured by years, but by the love you give and the hope you leave behind. That night, by the fire, I told them one of my favorite truths. The world will always change, sometimes in ways that frighten us. But no matter how far technology takes us, no matter how strange the future becomes, the heart of humanity is the same. We long to be known. We long to be loved. Hold fast to that, and you'll never lose your way. They listened in silence, faces glowing in the firelight, and I realized my role wasn't finished. I wasn't just a witness to survival, I was a storyteller, a keeper of memory. And memory, shared with love, is the strongest shield of all. As the weeks passed, something remarkable happened. The fear that once clung to every face began to fade. People laughed louder, worked harder, and dreamed bigger. Where there had once been whispers of despair, now there were plans for tomorrow. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. Sarah called the first gathering in the open field behind my house. Dozens came, some from miles away, carrying baskets of food, jars of honey, and even instruments long forgotten. They built a fire taller than any I'd ever seen, and around it they sang, not just the hymns I knew, but new songs, songs of freedom, of defiance, of joy. I sat close to the flames, my cane resting by my chair, and thought of the nights I had once spent alone, praying for a sign that the world could be healed. And here it was, not in miracles from the sky, but in ordinary people choosing to love each other through the storm. In the middle of the gathering, Sarah stood and raised her hand. "We can't just hide anymore," she said, her voice steady and strong. "If we want a future, we have to build it together." The crowd murmured in agreement. She spoke of rebuilding schools, planting fields, and creating safe havens for those still trapped in the city. Her words reminded me of something my mother used to tell me back in Kansas. Don't wait for the world to change, Maggie. Be the one who starts the change. And that's exactly what Sarah was doing. After the meeting, a young girl no older than 8 tugged on my sleeve. "Miss Maggie," she asked shyly, "will you tell us more stories tomorrow?" I bent down, brushed her hair back, and whispered, "Of course, darling, stories are how we remember who we are." That night, under the stars, I lay awake on my porch and thought about the path ahead. The machines might still return. The world might still test us. But I knew in my bones that something had shifted. Hope had taken root. And hope is the one thing even an army of machines cannot crush. As I drifted to sleep, I smiled, whispering to the night, maybe 2,800 isn't the end after all. Maybe it's the beginning. The next morning, the fields were alive with movement. Men and women gathered stones to rebuild walls. Children carried buckets of water. And Sarah oversaw it all with a steady hand. My porch became the place where decisions were made, where maps were drawn, and where hope was spoken out loud. One young man came to me, his hands rough from work. "Miss Maggie," he said, "how did you keep faith when the world seemed so lost?" I looked at him, remembering the long nights of loneliness, the tears shed in silence. "Because faith," I told him, "isn't about seeing the light. It's about believing it's there, even in the darkest night, and holding on until morning comes." Those words seemed to spread like fire. Soon, whenever someone grew tired or afraid, others would whisper, "Hold on until morning." It became our motto, our anchor. Sarah, meanwhile, was tireless. She organized a team to head back toward the city, not to fight, but to rescue. They would sneak into the shadows, find those still hiding, and guide them to safety. Before she left, she came to me, kneeling by my rocking chair. "Maggie," she said, "if something happens to me." I cut her off, pressing my wrinkled hand to hers. "Don't speak that way, child. You carry more than yourself, now you carry all of us. And that's why you'll come back." She smiled, though her eyes glistened with tears. And for a moment I saw not just the leader she had become, but the frightened girl who had once knocked on my door. I pulled her into an embrace. "Remember," I whispered, "bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's walking forward even when your knees shake." When Sarah and her team disappeared into the woods, the rest of us stayed behind, working, singing, waiting. Every evening, I kept the porch light burning, the same way I had the first night Sarah arrived. To us, it had become more than a lamp, it was a promise. A promise that no one was ever truly alone. And as I sat rocking, the fireflies dancing in the dusk, I thought, maybe this is what salvation looks like. Not sudden, not grand, but built day by day, with hands and hearts bound together. It was on the 7th night that I saw the lantern's first tiny flickers moving through the trees. My heart leapt, and I rose from my chair as the shapes drew nearer. Sarah was among them, her face tired but shining, and behind her came dozens more. Families, elders, children, people who had escaped the city because she and her team had led them out. When they stepped into the firelight, the children in our camp cheered, and the newcomers collapsed with relief. Sarah met my eyes, her voice trembling. "Maggie, there are so many more. They're waiting, hiding, hoping for someone to show them the way." I wrapped her in my arms, whispering, "And that someone is you, child." That night, our little refuge swelled with voices and laughter. We shared bread, told stories, and sang. But beneath the joy, I could feel the weight pressing down on Sarah's shoulders. She knew the fight was far from over. Later, when the others slept, she sat beside me on the porch. The moonlight caught the determination in her face. "Maggie, the program is weakening. Too many are slipping through. Too many are resisting. But that also means they'll strike harder. We need to be ready." I listened, my cane resting against my knee, and I thought of all the battles I had seen in my lifetime. Wars fought with guns, protests fought with voices, private wars fought in lonely hearts. "Sarah," I said softly, "there's one thing you must remember. The enemy may come stronger, but so does love. The more they try to erase it, the brighter it burns." Her eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed my hand. "You always know what to say." I chuckled. "That's just age talking. Live long enough, and you learn a thing or two worth passing on." By dawn, the camp was alive with planning. Runners were set to spread word of our safety, of our defiance. Families began weaving banners, not of war, but of hope, bright colors stitched together from scraps of cloth, flying like decorations in the wind. As I watched them, I realized we weren't just a hidden band of survivors anymore. We had become something larger, something unshakable. We had become a people again. My name is Margaret Johnson, though most folks just call me Maggie. I'm 75 years old, born and raised in Kansas, and I've seen more changes in my lifetime than I ever thought a soul could witness. But nothing prepared me for the year 2800. Now, you might be wondering how a woman like me could possibly live that long. The truth is, I didn't expect to either. Back in my day, we believed 75 was already a blessing. But science, medicine, and faith carried me forward, and here I am, an old lady, still standing, still telling stories. And what a story this is. It all began when the skies turned silver. They called it the Great Shift, The air grew cleaner, but the silence in the streets grew heavier. Machines replaced not only our labor, but our laughter. I'd walk past houses without the sound of children playing, only the soft hum of engines. And it broke my heart, because life without joy is no life at all. I remember sitting on my porch, yes. I still had an old wooden porch, creaking and stubborn like me, watching neighbors pass by in those floating pods. Nobody waved anymore. Everyone stared at their screens. And I thought, Lord, don't let us lose each other. That was the first lesson I want you to hold on to. No matter how advanced the world becomes, people need people. There were nights when fear crept into my bones. Rumors spread that the government wanted to erase memories, to clean the mind of pain and regret. Some called it mercy, but I knew better. Our scars are what make us human. They remind us that we've endured, that we've overcome. I whispered to myself, Maggie, if they ever come for your memories, you hold them tight, even the painful ones, because here's another truth. Sorrow teaches us compassion, and compassion keeps the soul alive. But it wasn't all sorrow. There came a day when the skies opened, and I saw the children return. They weren't like the children I once knew. They carried knowledge in their eyes, as if they had read the whole library of the world before they could walk. But when I offered them cookies from my oven, an old recipe passed down from my mother, they smiled. And in that smile, I saw hope. Technology hadn't stolen their hearts. They still craved love, comfort, and the warmth of a grandmother's care. That was the beginning of the great turn. The world had become strange, sometimes frightening, but it hadn't lost its soul, and neither had I. I won't lie to you, there were times I thought the world had gone too far. I remember the night I first heard the sound of the harvesters, huge machines that moved through the towns, collecting what they called excess. Some said it was food, others whispered it was people. Nobody knew for sure, and nobody asked too many questions, because fear makes folks quiet. But I wasn't quiet. I was too old for silence. One evening, I stood in my doorway, cane in hand, and shouted at one of those machines, "You don't scare me." My voice shook, but I meant it, because sometimes courage isn't the absence of fear, it's standing tall even when your knees are trembling. That's a lesson I want you to remember. Bravery doesn't belong only to the young. Still, I was afraid of losing the little things that made life sweet. The smell of fresh bread in the oven, the sound of rain tapping against my window, the warmth of a hug. Those are treasures, not the shiny gadgets or the silver towers they built in the cities. I held on to those small joys like pearls in my pocket. And let me tell you, when the world feels too big, too strange, to heavy look for the little blessings. They will carry you through. Then came the winter of silence. Snow fell heavier than I'd ever seen, covering streets, cars, even rooftops in blankets so thick the world looked like it was asleep. For months, nobody came out. The pods stopped moving. The harvesters vanished. I thought maybe humanity had finally folded in on itself. And I sat by my fire, rocking in my chair, praying, Lord, if there's still light in us, let it shine again. And he answered, not in thunder, not in fire, but in a knock on my door. A soft, gentle knock. When I opened it, there stood a young woman, no older than 20, shivering, with eyes full of desperation. She said, Ma'am, I don't know where else to go. I wrapped her in a quilt my mother had made, sat her by the fire, and poured her a cup of tea. She cried as she held it, and I realized something, even in 2800, with all their machines and brilliance, the world still needed kindness. Sometimes the oldest lessons are the ones that save us. That night, I decided my porch light would never go out again. No matter how dark the world became, I would keep a light burning for the lost, for the lonely, for anyone who needed to know they were not alone. The young woman's name was Sarah. She told me she had run from the city, where the mine program was beginning. They promised peace, promised no more sadness, no more regrets, just clean, empty minds. But Sarah said the people who went in never came back the same. They returned smiling, but their eyes were hollow, like dolls left out in the rain. I listened to her trembling words and felt the fire of anger rise in me. I had lived through wars, recessions, even a pandemic back in my early years. But this was different. They weren't trying to take our lives, they were trying to take our souls. That night, as Sarah slept by the fire, I sat awake, whispering to myself, memories are sacred. They carry the laughter of my children, the voice of my husband when he sang off key, the lessons my mother taught me on that Kansas farm, even the heartbreaks, the nights I cried into my pillow, the mistakes I swore I'd never repeat. They shaped me. Without them, I wouldn't be me. And isn't that the greatest tragedy? To be alive, but not yourself? When dawn came, I looked at Sarah and said, Honey, if they want your mind, you fight for it, because a scarred heart is still stronger than an empty one. That's another lesson for you. Don't ever let anyone convince you that pain makes you weak. Pain is proof you've lived. Days passed, and word spread of others who had escaped the city. My little home became a refuge. Old quilts, warm soup, and the steady beat of my rocking chair became their comfort. Some of them were children, their faces pale with fear. Others were men and women who had lost everything but their will to be free. and me an old lady with a cane I became their anchor. Funny how life works. I thought I was too old to matter, but God showed me that no matter the century, love still makes a difference. Of course, it wasn't safe. We heard rumors that the harvesters now carried the cleaners, machines that tracked those who resisted the mine program. Every night, when I blew out the lamp, I prayed, Lord, hide us under your wings. And somehow, morning always came. These was one night, though, when the machines came closer than ever. The ground shook, the windows rattled, and Sarah grabbed my hand. I looked her in the eye and said, Don't you fear. They may have power, but we have each other. And as long as we stand together, they can't take what truly matters. That night, the air outside roared like a storm, though the skies were clear. The harvesters had come, their giant shadows crawling across the snow. The sound of their engines was like a low growl, shaking my little house to its bones. Sarah clutched my arm, the children huddled together, and for a moment, I'll be honest, I felt the old ache of fear in my chest. But then I remembered something my daddy used to tell me when I was a girl on the farm. Fear is like a fire, Maggie. Let it burn wild, and it'll destroy you. Hold it steady, and it'll keep you warm. So I took a deep breath, steadied my fire, and whispered a prayer. The harvesters stopped right outside my gate. Lights swept across the yard, sharp and cold. One beam hit my old porch swing. Another slid across the window. The children gasped, but I held up my hand. Quiet now, I whispered. We stand still. We stand strong. Minutes felt like hours. My mind raced with memories the war protests of the 60s. The tornado that nearly took our farmhouse. The night I buried my husband. Every moment had taught me resilience, and I knew this was no different. If I broke, they would break. So I sat tall in my chair, as if daring the machines to challenge me. Then, as quickly as they had come, the harvesters turned away. Their lights vanished into the distance, their engines fading like thunder rolling off to another town. The silence that followed was so heavy, I could hear Sarah's heartbeat against the quilt she held. When it was over, the children cheered, but I raised my hand. No, don't cheer yet. I told them. We aren't safe because the machines left. We're safe because we stayed together. That's the truth I want you to carry. Safety doesn't always come from walls or weapons. Sometimes it comes from unity, from love that refuses to bow down. That night, as the fire crackled low, Sarah looked at me with tearful eyes and said, "Why didn't you run, Maggie?" I smiled and touched her hand. Because, sweetheart, I've been running my whole life. From fear, from grief, from change. And I learned that running never saves you. Standing does. I didn't know it then, But that moment planted something in her heart, a seed of courage. And like any seed, it was about to grow into something far bigger than either of us could imagine. The morning after the harvesters passed, Sarah was different. I saw it in her eyes. The fear was still there, sure, but behind it burned a spark small, but strong. She spent the whole day helping me patch the windows, feed the children, and gather wood for the fire. Her hands shook at first, but each task seemed to steady her. That evening, as the others slept, she sat by me and whispered, "Maggie, I don't want to be afraid anymore. I want to fight back." I looked at her for a long moment, rocking slow in my chair. She reminded me of myself at her age, full of doubt, but hungry for purpose. I told her, "Child, fighting back doesn't always mean swinging fists or raising weapons. Sometimes it means holding on to the things that can't control your kindness, your memory, your soul. That's how you resist." She nodded, but I could see her mind racing. And over the next few days, Sarah became the heartbeat of our little refuge. She gathered the children in the evenings and taught them songs she remembered from before the city changed. She told stories by the fire, stories of bravery and freedom, even when her voice trembled. The children clung to her words like lifelines. One night, she asked me, "Maggie, why do you still believe the world can heal after everything we've seen?" I smiled and reached for her hand, because I've lived long enough to know that darkness never wins forever. It may last a season. It may even last a lifetime, but somewhere, somehow, light finds a way back in. And honey, we get to be part of that light. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. She wanted to return to the city, not to surrender, but to find others like her, people hiding from the mind program, waiting for a chance to break free. At first, I wanted to stop her. She was young, fragile, too precious to risk. But then I realized she wasn't just a guest in my home anymore. She was a flame, and flames are meant to spread. So I hugged her tight, wrapped her in one of Mama's quilts, and told her, "Go, but don't forget, you carry more than yourself now. You carry every prayer, every memory, every bit of love we've poured into you. That's your armor." As she walked away through the snow, my heart ached with both fear and pride. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again, but I knew this much. The world was not finished, because Sarah was not finished, and neither was I. Days turned into weeks after Sarah left, and each night I kept the porch light burning, praying it would guide her back. The children often asked me, "Maggie, do you think she's coming home?" I'd smile, even when my heart was heavy, and say, "Hope is like a lantern. Darlings, you keep it lit even when the night is long. But truth be told, doubt crept in. There were whispers on the wind, rumors carried by travelers passing through. The city had tightened its grip. The mine program was spreading faster than ever. Folks said resistance was useless. Some even claimed Sarah had been taken. I refused to believe it. Sometimes faith is stubbornness dressed in grace. Then, one icy morning, just as the sun cracked the horizon, I heard footsteps crunching in the snow. My heart pounded as I opened the door, and there she was, Seraphine, pale, but alive, her eyes blazing brighter than ever. Behind her stood 3 others, a young man missing an arm, a woman clutching a baby, and another boy no older than 10. They looked worn, broken, but they were free. Sarah collapsed into my arms, whispering, "We found them, Maggie. There are more hundreds hiding, waiting, praying for a sign." Tears filled my eyes, but I held her face in my hands and said, "Child, you are the sign." That night, our little home overflowed with voices. The new arrivals told stories of narrow escapes, of friends lost, but also of sparks of defiance spreading through the city. People were beginning to question the program. Some gods had even turned against it, secretly helping escapees. The tide, though small, was shifting. Still, danger was never far. Sarah warned us that the harvesters had grown restless, patrolling deeper into the countryside, searching for pockets of resistance. "They know we're out here," she said, her voice low, "and they're coming." The children grew quiet at her words, fear settling over them like frost. I leaned forward in my chair and said, "Listen to me, all of you. We may be small, but love makes us mighty. We will not be erased. Not by machines, not by fear, not by anyone." And in that moment, something changed. The children straightened their backs. The young man nodded firmly. Even the baby stirred, as if sensing the strength in the room. For the first time in a long while, I felt not just survival, but the stirring of victory. The house was no longer just a refuge, it had become a meeting place, a beacon. Every day, more faces appeared at my door. Mothers with little ones wrapped in rags, young men with fire in their eyes, elders who had seen too much, but still carried wisdom in their bones. My small porch groaned under the weight of all those seeking shelter, yet my heart never felt fuller. Sarah took charge of organizing them, her voice clear and strong. She mapped safe routes through the woods, taught the children how to stay silent when danger passed, and whispered hope into every ear. But whenever she grew weary, she'd look to me, and I'd nod, rocking in my chair, reminding her without words, "You are not alone." One evening, a boy of about 12 asked me, Miss Maggie? Why do the machines want our minds?" I looked at him, his face too young for such questions, and said gently, "Because they know if they take your memory, they take your power. But let me tell you something. Some memories aren't just in your head. They live in your heart, in your hands, in the way you love. No machine can ever take that." That night, as the fire warmed the crowded room, I realized I had become more than a caretaker. To these people, I was a reminder of what they were fighting for: a grandmother's wisdom, a safe porch light, the sound of a lullaby humming low. Sometimes symbols are stronger than weapons, but the danger grew nearer. We heard the harvesters in the distance more often, their searchlights sweeping the hills like restless ghosts. Sarah urged us to prepare for the worst. Some wanted to run, but I told them, running only makes you tired. Standing together makes you strong. So we stood. We trained in secret, shared food, told stories, and kept our lanterns burning. Each small act of defiance was a declaration. We are still human, and we will not be erased. I often wondered how an old woman like me ended up at the center of such a battle. But then I remembered the lessons of my youth, the marches for freedom, the neighbors who shared bread during hard times, the church hymns that rose above despair. This was simply another chapter in the same story, people fighting to keep their humanity. And though the storm was still gathering, I could feel it deep in my bones. Change was coming. The night it happened, the air was too still. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. I knew before I heard the first rumble that the harvesters were coming, not passing by this time, but coming for us. Sarah rushed inside, her face pale. "They've found the house," she whispered. Panic rippled through the room. The children cried. The men cursed under their breath. And even the strongest among us looked ready to crumble. I stood slowly, leaning on my cane, and raised my voice. "Listen to me. Fear is what they want. If we scatter, they win. If we stand, we show them we are more than their machines." The walls shook as the harvesters drew near, their light slicing through the trees. Sarah grabbed my hand. "Maggie, we can't fight them." "No," I said firmly, "but we can outlast them." We doused the fire, gathered close, and sat in silence. I began to hum a hymn my mother used to sing, low and steady. One by one, the others joined in soft voices, weaving together, trembling at first, then stronger. The children's cries quieted, replaced by the sound of hope. The harvesters surrounded the house. Their beams lit up the windows. Their engines roared like thunder. For a moment, I thought the walls would fall. But then, something unexpected happened. The machines paused. Their lights flickered, sweeping back and forth as if confused. Sarah leaned close. "Maggie, what's happening?" I didn't know for certain, but I felt it deep inside. Our unity was something they couldn't understand. They could read fear, obedience, silence, but not love, not faith, not voices raised together in defiance. Minutes passed like hours, but finally, the harvesters turned. One by one, their lights faded into the distance, their growls swallowed by the night. When the last echo was gone, the room erupted with sobs and laughter. Sarah threw her arms around me. "You saved us," she cried. I shook my head. "No, child, we saved us." Because when hearts beat as one, no machine can break them. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat by the fire again, brighter than before, and I told them stories of the past of times when people stood together against impossible odds. And I realized this wasn't just survival anymore. This was the beginning of something greater. The machines thought they could erase humanity. Instead, they had awakened it. It was only a matter of time before the machines returned. We all knew it. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Then one night, the ground trembled with a force greater than before. The harvesters had come back, not just a handful, but an army. Their lights tore through the trees like lightning, their engines growling like beasts ready to devour. Fear rippled through the room, but this time no one ran. Sarah stood in the center, her voice firm. "We hold the line, not with weapons, but with who we are." We gathered together, shoulder to shoulder, old and young alike. Some clutched wooden staffs, others nothing but quilts and prayers. I took my place in my rocking chair, as I always had, and began to hum the hymn. Slowly, the voices joined mine, one after another, until the air itself seemed to vibrate with our song. The harvesters surrounded the house, their beams cutting through the darkness, blinding, searching. But instead of fear, we answered with harmony, our voices rising, steady and sure. The machines paused. Their lights flickered again, just as they had before. Sarah stepped onto the porch, her head held high. "We are not yours," she shouted into the night. "You cannot erase us." Something extraordinary happened then. One by one, the machines began to falter. Their engines stuttered, their beams dimmed. It was as if our defiance, the unity, the memory, the love was something they were never built to withstand. And then, silence. The great metal beasts stood frozen, lifeless, like statues in the snow. Cheers erupted, tears streamed, and voices rose higher than ever. For the first time in centuries, maybe, the night belonged to us, not to the machines. I sat in my chair, rocking slow, and whispered to myself, "We did it." But I knew better. It wasn't me. It wasn't Sarah alone. It was all of us, standing together, refusing to let go of what made us human. Sarah knelt by my side and pressed her hand to mine. "Maggie," she said softly, "this is only the beginning." And I believed her, because in that moment, with the harvesters silent and the people singing, I saw it clear as day, the dawn of a new world, not built by machines, not ruled by fear, but by the simple, eternal power of love. The days that followed felt like stepping into a new season, not just of weather, but of spirit. Our camp grew until it was no longer a camp at all, but a village. Tents sprang up across the fields, fires burned each night, and the sound of voices carried far into the distance. Where once there had been silence and fear, now there was laughter, music, and the murmur of dreams. People came from everywhere, farmers who had hidden in bonds, teachers who had secretly kept old books, even a few gods who had abandoned the program to stand with us. Each person brought a piece of themselves to add to the whole. Stories, songs, skills. Together, they wove a tapestry of humanity no machine could unravel. Sarah became our leader in truth, her courage infectious. She spoke often by the fire, reminding us why we stood, why we refused to bow. They can strip our tools, they can break our walls, but they cannot touch our hearts, she would say, and the people would rise with cheers. Yet danger loomed ever closer. Scouts reported that the program was preparing a final sweep, an effort to crush resistance once and for all. The thought of it weighed heavy on everyone, especially the children. One little boy came to me, his lip trembling. "Miss Maggie, what if they find us?" I bent down, smoothing his hair. "Then we remember who we are. Machines can take many things, darling, but they cannot take your kindness, your courage, or your soul. That's what makes you stronger than them." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Sarah and I walked together. She carried herself with a strength that amazed me, but I saw the weariness in her eyes. "Maggie," she said quietly, "what if this battle is the last? What if we don't win?" I took her hand and squeezed it. "Child, sometimes victory isn't about living to see tomorrow. Sometimes it's about planting something that tomorrow can grow. And that, Sarah, we've already done." She nodded, and I could see her spirit lift. The harvest of hope we had sown was ripening, ready to be reaped. We both knew the storm was coming, but we were ready to stand in the rain. The storm came sooner than we expected. It began with the ground trembling under our feet, a low rumble that spread through the hills like thunder rolling across the plains. Then came the light's dozens of beams sweeping the night sky, piercing the dark like cold knives. The harvesters were no longer hunting quietly. This was a march of war. The children clung to their mothers. The men gripped their makeshift staffs, and for a moment, fear rippled through the crowd. But Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "We knew this day would come," she said. and we will not bow. Her words settled over us like a shield. The people stood taller, shoulders squared, and I felt the fire of something ancient. Burn in our bones the will of free people refusing chains. The harvesters formed a wall of steel at the edge of the field, their engines roaring. A voice crackled through the air, cold and mechanical. Surrender your memories. Erase your pain. Be cleansed. I leaned on my cane and shouted back, my old voice sharp as a blade. Pain makes us human. You will not take who we are. Sarah raised a lantern high, and every person in the field lifted theirs too. The glow spread like a river of stars, pushing back against the artificial beams of the machines. We began to sing not softly this time, but loud, fierce, a chorus of defiance that rose into the heavens. The harvesters advanced. Their lights flared, their arms reached forward, but then something happened that no one expected. The machines faltered, their movements slowed, their beams flickered. It was as if the sound, the unity, the love was something their circuits couldn't bear. Hold steady, Sarah cried, her lantern blazing. Don't stop. Our voices grew louder, our hearts pounding as one. The great steel giants trembled, their roars breaking into sputters. One by one, they collapsed into silence, crashing into the earth with a sound like falling mountains. When the last machine stilled, the field went quiet. Then the people erupted in cries of triumph, their voices echoing into the night. Tears streaked down Sarah's face as she looked at me. We did it, Maggie. We really did it. I smiled through my own tears. No, child, love did it, and love always will. When the last harvester fell, the world seemed to breathe again. The night was so quiet, I could hear the crackle of the lantern flames and the soft sobs of people clinging to one another. For the first time in centuries, perhaps, the air felt free. No commands from machines, no hollow promises of cleansing, just silent sand in that silence, the sound of humanity returning. At dawn, the sun rose over the hills, painting the fields in gold. The children ran through the grass, laughing as if they had been born anew. Mothers sang while hanging quilts to dry. Fathers dug into the soil to plant seeds, and the old ones like me sat watching, tears shining in our eyes. Sarah stood at the center of it all, a lantern still in her hand. Her voice carried across the camp. This is only the beginning. The world isn't healed yet, but we will heal it. Not with machines, but with our hands. Not with fear, but with hope. The people cheered, their voices strong and full. I leaned back in my chair and thought of all I had lived through, the wars, the loss, the loneliness, and yet here I was, 75 years old in the year 2800, watching a new chapter unfold. It was the reminder that no matter how broken the world sees, it is never beyond repair. Later that day, a group of children gathered around me. Miss Maggie, one of them asked, "What do we do now?" I smiled, brushing the dust from my skirt. Now, my dears, we remember. We remember what was lost, what was fought for, and what was saved, and we pass it on, so the world never forgets again. Sarah came to sit beside me, her shoulders weary, but her eyes shining bright. Maggie, the people are looking to us. How do we lead them? I took her hand, my wrinkled fingers closing over hers. By loving them, child, lead with love, and you'll never lose your way. That night, as the stars blanketed the sky, music filled the air, not the mechanical hum of machines, but the pure sound of voices, drums, and laughter. And in that moment, I knew the machines had not won. Humanity had. Now, as I sit on this old porch and watch the children play under the wide American sky, I realize something. I was never meant to see the year 2800. Yet here I am, a witness to both the darkest nights and the brightest mornings. People once feared the machines, but in the end, it was not strength or weapons that saved us. It was love, memory, and faith. Sarah leads with courage, the children laugh with freedom, and the earth itself blooms again. My story may be nearing its close, but their story is just beginning, and that's how it should be. So hear me, whoever you are, wherever you live, never surrender your heart. Hold on to your memories, even the painful ones. They are the roots that keep you human. And remember, no storm lasts forever. After the coldest winter, spring always comes. And as for me, Maggie Johnson, I'll keep this porch light burning for hope, for love, for all of us, always.